521. This is your lesson for 521. Does this answer make sense? Making sense of decimal multiplication. In the previous section, you learned how to find parts of parts and multiply fractions. Now you get to apply these concepts to real-life situations. As you work with your team, you will consider whether particular answers make sense by relying on your understanding of relative sizes of parts. So we're going to start with problem 540. Problem 540. As you answer the questions below, think about multiple representations of portions to help you make sense of multiplying percents and decimals. Tony thought about the sunglasses sale in problem 539 in a different way. He realized that if you took advantage of the sale, then using the coupon meant you would pay 60% of 30%. If you have not done so already, represent 60% of 30% using decimals. Write the result of calculating 60% of 30% as a decimal. Explain Tony's method. So, I'm going to help you do this as decimals. So we have 60%. So when you have 60%, you want to move your decimal to the left. So we would have 0.6, and then we have 30%. So again, we're going to move our decimal 2 to the left. So 0.6 times 0.3. 0.6 times 0.3. So that's 6/10 times 3/10 equals 18/100. So now you need to explain Tony's method. Go ahead and pause the video and explain Tony's method. Okay, if you're back with me, B says to find 40% of 20%, Chica used decimal multiplication. She thinks that 4/10 times 2/10 equals 8/10. Is she correct? Work with your team to find a way to show whether Chica's answer makes sense. Go ahead and pause your video and answer B. Okay, if you're back with me, you've answered part B, and we're going to save that to discuss that in class. Moving down to C, what happens when you multiply 1/10 by 1/10? Use fraction multiplication to find the answer and then represent the problem using decimals. So we have 1/10 times 1/10. So fraction multiplication, we're just multiplying across. 1 times 1 is 1. 10 times 10 is 100. But now we need to use it, and then we need to represent decimals and find the answer using decimals. So 1/10 is 10%. So move the decimal 2 to the left. It's 0.1 times 0.1. That's 1/10 times 1/10 equals 0.01 or 1/100th. D says multiply 1/10 times 4/100ths. Then represent this problem and answer using decimals. So go ahead and pause the video and answer part D. If you're back with me, you've answered part D, and we're going to save it. Moving on to part E. Calculate the correct answer to Chica's problem for part B. So go ahead and pause the video and answer part E. We're going to save this and talk about this in class just like we saved and talked about B. In parts A through E, you multiplied parts by parts. Compare the products to the numbers that were multiplied. Which products are greater than or less than the numbers multiplied? Go ahead and pause your video and answer part F. Okay, we're going to save that part and talk about it in class. 541 says Ben and Connor needed to calculate 20% of 4 and 312 thousandths. They started by drawing the generic rectangle at right. Why did they write 2/10? So go ahead and pause your video and try and figure out why they wrote 2/10. Okay, 2/10 is 20% written as a fraction? B says copy their generic rectangle on your paper, which it's already there for you, and work with your team to label the missing dimensions in areas with fractions. Find the product and then express it as a decimal. So go ahead and try this on your own, and then I will go over it with you. Okay, if you're back with me, you have tried this one on your own. So we have 4, because that is our whole number. And then we need to write the other parts as fractions. So the 3 is in the tenths column, so it's 3/10. The 1 is in the hundredth column, so it's 1/100th. And the 2 is in the thousandths column, so it's 2/1000ths. So when you multiplied, you would have had 8/10, 6/100ths. This was 2/1000ths, and this was 4/10,000ths. So we needed to find the product. 8/10 plus 6/100ths plus 2/1000ths plus 4/10,000ths. So instead of trying to find a common denominator here, all we have to do is put these decimals in their correct spot. So we have 0 and 8/10, 6/100ths, 2/1000ths, 4/10,000ths, which would be your answer. C says, Ben wrote the work shown at right. Work with your team to explain how his work is related to the work you did with the generic rectangle in part A. So go ahead and pause your video and answer this. Okay, if you're back with me, hopefully that you saw each of his products down here. Were products of the generic rectangle. So those are called subproducts. The subproducts were part of the generic rectangle but they're written as decimals instead of fractions. Oops. Okay, so those subproducts right here are the same products from the generic rectangle. These are just written as fractions. These are just written as decimals. So moving on to part D. It says, help Ben complete his work by writing the answer to his multiplication problem. So go ahead and do part D. And that, if you're back with me, that's going to be a question we save in class. E says, why did Ben line up the decimal points in his method instead of writing the sum as shown as right? So go ahead and pause your video and answer part E. Again, that is going to be something that we save to talk about in class. 452, work with your team to make sense of another method for multiplying 2/10 times 4 and 312 thousandths. Use your generic rectangle from problem 541 to write 2/10 times 4 and 312 thousandths as a sum of 4 products and then simplify. So we have your generic rectangle from the other page, which is, I'll help you out here, 2/10 times 4 plus 1, or times 4 over 1, plus 2/10 times 3/10 plus 2/10 times 1/100th plus 2/10 times 4/1000ths. So this is where it gets a little messy. So we have, again, 2 times 4 is 8. So we have 8/10 plus 6/100 plus 2 1,000 plus 8 10,000. Now we need a common denominator. Well, our common denominator is 10,000 here. So we need 10,000. We need to do 8/10 times 1,000 over 1,000 plus 6/100 times 100 over 100 plus 2 1,000 times 10 over 10 plus 8 10,000. So we have 8 times 1,000, which is 8,000, over our common denominator is 10,000. 6 times 100, 600, over 10,000, because 100 times 100 is 10,000, plus 2 times 10 is 20, over 10,000, plus 8 over 10,000. So now we need to add our numerators. 8,000 plus 600 is 8,600, plus 20 is 8,620, plus 8. So that would be 8,628 over 10,000. B says, Connor has shown the work at right. How does the work you did with fractions in part A help explain what he has decided to place, where he has decided to place the decimal point in his answer? Discuss this with your team and be prepared to share your ideas with the class. So go ahead and pause the video and answer part B. Okay, so hopefully by now you have answered part B. So we're going to take a look here. If I have, hang on one second, I'm going to mess up here. Let's go back up here because I made a mistake. This should have been 2 times 2, which is 4. So I'm sorry about that. That should have been 4. This should be 4. This should be 4. So your answer should be 8,624 over 10,000. So if we had 8,624 over 10,000, that 10,000 is telling you where you put the decimal place. So if I have 8,624, my decimal's over here, I need to move it 1, 2, 3, 4 because of the 1,000th place. So 0 and 800 or 0.8624 is your answer. That was my fault because I had 8 up there and that was not correct. I do not believe, let me double check. Yeah, that was not correct. So that is correct now. And now we are on 800, or 800. Oh, I got 800 on my mind. 5-43. Mohammed is multiplying 3 and 9/10 times 6/10. His work is shown at right. A, will the answer be more than 2 or less than 2? Explain how you know. B, work with your team to figure out where the numbers 54/100 and 1 and 8/10 come from in Mohammed's work and whether he is correct. C, Mohammed noticed that to get the answer, he will need to add 5/10 and 8/10. How should he write that sum in his work? And D, finish Muhammad's work to find the product of 3 and 9/10 times 6/10. So I would like you to answer problem 543. That is going to be the last problem that you are doing on your notes today. And as always, if you have any questions, please let me know.